All right, welcome back to another episode of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. I am JT Olson. Back again with me is Garrett Ballard, my co-host. Garrett, welcome back.
I appreciate that. Yeah, out last week, had a little bit of stuff come up, but glad to be back. Excited for another episode. NFC South preview. We got a good one coming today. We got a great guest, uh, Devin Jackson for is it Nolan News? Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's NOLA.com. It's just the Twitter handle. But yeah, NOLA.com. It's a combination of the Times Picayune and the Advocate down in Louisiana. So help cover Saints, LSU, Pelicans, pretty much everything Louisiana oriented and sports betting as well. So
Love that. Devin is, for my money, one of the best in the business. We are stoked to have him on this show, this podcast, to talk some Saints football from his point of view, not ours, because you know how we feel about the Saints. But
I was going to say, speak for yourself. I mean,
yeah,
talking Saints football is like talking colonoscopy. This is just not, it's an episode I'm looking forward to because I know it's going to be great content, but it's just going to be like, yeah, remember that game when the Saints beat the Bucks and that other game when the Saints beat the Bucks? And it's just, man.
that's how it goes. At the end of the day, we're all football fans, so it'll be pretty easy for us to just chat ball. So
yeah, I mean, look, I was just as surprised as you guys that the Saints won both games. So I I'm floored here. I honestly, I mean, if we went back and looked through the game, I still couldn't tell you how they won. So it's just one of those things, man. It's just one of those weird coincidences.
You say coincidence, but what is it? 6, 7, 8 regular season games in a row for the Saints. I mean, we're beyond coincidence and a trend. And I
Yeah,
know
I mean, look,
it's
yeah, look. I mean, it's like I said, it's just one of those games. I look, like I said last year, I honestly did not see it coming either time. I mean, even the year before, I still couldn't tell you that they would have beat them twice. I mean, it just doesn't make sense because I mean, you look at the Saints season, and we'll get to it in just a minute. I mean, they beat the Bucks, but then lose to the Giants and lose to the Falcons at home. I mean, it was really truly an up and down year if there was ever one for a team last season for the Saints.
yeah, it was definitely a bit of an unconventional season to say the least. I think a lot of what happened not only in the season but in the offseason following was kind of not what we're used to seeing from the Saints. Like for last like 8 7 8 years, the Saints have been one of the more consistent teams in the NFL. You could really expect a lot of good stuff out of them and expect them to perform well. But last season, obviously, first season without Drew Brees, kind of shifting into a little bit of quarterback uncertainty, and then Sean Payton retires just pretty surprisingly, I feel like, and then obviously you have to lose some guys in free agency because of the cap situation. It's really a new look team here.
Yeah, it's not going to be your conventional Saints. I mean, a lot of the same familiar faces are still there from their playoff runs. Obviously, Marshawn Lattimore, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Alvin Kamara. We'll see with him. We'll talk a little about him a little bit later. Michael Thomas hopefully coming back. So, I mean, they have a number of guys that have been part of those playoff runs, but the people leading in particular are a little bit different. Obviously, you guys are familiar with Jameis Winston, played for the Bucks. But also Dennis Allen. It's his second time being a head coach. First time didn't go so well. So for him, it's going to be a little bit different. I mean, a lot of the kind of philosophy and the way the Saints are built hasn't changed, but it's just a different person leading the charge now. You're not going to look at the sideline anymore and expect, Sean Payton to however many plays he claims to have had, it's not going to be that no more. Focus is going to be more so on what's going on in the field. You're not going to see a lot of those camera shots to the sideline. You might see a head coach that's focused more on the defensive side of the ball. So everything's a little bit of change in New Orleans, but I think the status quo remains the same in terms of how they're going to conduct business. But it's going to be about, now it's on Dennis Allen. He's going to be the one making the decisions at the end of games. those fourth down decisions that the Saints were pretty aggressive with. I might expect them to be a little bit more conservative in terms of how they approach that. So there's going to be a lot of different things with the New Orleans Saints in 2022 that people were going to have to get used to the new normal for.
Speaking of a shift to the conservative, we saw a very different Jameis Winston than what we Bucs fans are accustomed to seeing. What did he have? 3 interceptions through 9 games, something like that. And last we saw Jameis, he was throwing 30 interceptions in Tampa. Where do you stand with Jameis Winston right now? Is he someone you view can lead this team to the promised land, or is he still trying to prove himself in New Orleans?
I think it's a bit of prove himself, but also when you look at who he had on the roster, I mean, what he has now is night and day compared to what he had last year. Michael Thomas out of the mix. Pretty much when he was out of the mix, I mean, look, Marquez Callaway has some nice moments. Traquan Smith has had some nice moments. Deontay Harris, now Deontay Hardy, he's had some nice moments as well. But they're not really number one guys. They're not people you typically. Any NFL team, you won't see any of those guys be the top receiver. Maybe not even the top 2 option. So he had a little bit of work with. I mean, Alvin Kamara is Alvin Kamara. He's going to do what he does, but really didn't get much production out of the tight end position either. Adam Troutman, he started to come on a little bit later, but he got injured. And you look at some of the other tight ends on the roster, Jawan Johnson, he's a nice red zone target, but I don't think he's a complete tight end. Nick Vannett, kind of a older veteran that, doesn't bring a lot in the passing game. So when you look at who he had to throw to last year, it's kind of hard to make that determination whether or not he's going to be the guy leading going forward, but certainly they want him back and to give it another shot. And now you have Jarvis Landry in the mix. Michael Thomas is hopefully coming back. And obviously you still got Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith, Deontay Hardy. Now they're playing more secondary roles. So now you're bringing a formidable offense, not even mentioning Chris Olave, who was selected in the first round as well. So the Saints receiver position is way better than any group that they put out in 2021. So I think that gives me a little bit of confidence going to 2022 that James wants to, while he play a lot of conservative football, I think you're going to see him take a lot more shots down the field with some of his main weapons back and some new added weapons as well.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for, I feel like for seasons, just kind of going into the offseason for the Saints has been to add at least one other wide receiver, whether that be through free agency, through the draft. And they did both this year, obviously. Like you said, Chris Olave and then Jarvis Landry a little bit later to fill into that wide receiver 3 role, which JT and I have talked about in the past. We think is a really formidable wide receiver room. Like Landry, you can criticize him for his role in Cleveland. He was being at times a 1 there. Like he was being treated like he needed to be a 1, wide receiver 1, and that's just not where he's going to succeed. And if you can kind of just let him do his thing in a lesser role, like the Saints seemingly have him in, I really don't see any downside to the move. And then Chris Olave, it'll be interesting to see how they use him paired up with Michael Thomas. We obviously know Michael Thomas is very proficient at underneath routes, slant routes, kind of the shallow to medium stuff. And Chris Olave, if you're not familiar, is a great route runner. Really, really sudden guy. Not the best yak guy, yards after catch, run after catch, but he knows how to get open. So it will be interesting to see how they balance the similar skill sets, I should say. So do you have any kind of thoughts on that? Anything you've been hearing, anything like that?
Yeah, so I think with Olave, they wanted to obviously they traded up to get him, and he's what they wanted in a receiver opposite Michael Thomas. Or if Michael Thomas, never comes back healthy, you can assume kind of that pseudo wide receiver 1 role. I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver 1 off the bat, but I think he can work his way there. But the thing with the Saints is that they have a methodical approach to the offense. It's not a high explosive octane offense like the Buffalo Bills or the Kansas City Chiefs. Is more so predicated on, moving the chains, a lot of crossing routes, a lot of quick hitters, and taking advantage of what the defense is. And you're asking a lot of your quarterback as well. So I think with Jameis Winston, kind of his curve was, also kind of getting a little bit off track here, but kind of his curve was learning the offense in and out so he knows how to attack a defense. And with having Drew Brees at the helm so long, you uh, kind of take for granted how smart he was as of a football player. Didn't have the greatest arm strength. Didn't hit the deep ball a ton, especially in these last few years. But he was able to outsmart defenses with his mind. So I think now the Saints are in a new era, not under Sean Payne anymore. I think Winston, you're gonna see James Winston take some shots, but where Chris Olave can help is that he's not just your take the top off the defense type of guy. He can run those big routes. He can run those deep outs. So you're going to see someone use a little bit all over the field. The Saints love to move around their pieces. Alvin Kamara even runs routes from the receiver position. So you're going to see him play, I think, inside and out. And you're not just going to see him isolated to one side of the field and try to get him in motion and get him going on those shallow crosses as well. So I think Olave is in a good situation because, not only is he coming in a situation where he doesn't have to be the main guy immediately, you also have a guy in Jarvis Landry who is experienced veteran that's able to get it done even though he doesn't have the greatest athletic profile. Michael Thomas, I mean, he doesn't have the greatest athletic profile either, but he still gets it done. So you have a lot of those veteran voices in the building. I think Chris Olave will really benefit from that, and also show that you can put him on an island and you ask him to win one-on-one. I think he'll be able to get it done. So you're really going to start to see the offense maybe open up a little bit, especially I think through weeks 5 through 8. After the first few games, I think he kind of understands the speed of the game, where he needs to.
Oh, did we lose Devin?
Oh, might have lost Devin for a little bit, but a lot of what he was saying is kind of what I didn't want to hear as a Bucs fan. I'm not going to lie. Luckily, right before he kind of cut out there, he was saying that weeks 5 through 8 is really when we're going to start see this team click, and I think the Bucs play them. What is it, week 2?
Yep.
First game. Yeah. So if Devin's right, and I'm like I said, Devin for my money is one of the best out there. I'm trusting him. If the Bucs want to strike against the Saints, week 2 might be the prime opportunity for it. What you thinking?
Yeah, and you always want to get good rookies early, before they're truly acclimated. And frankly, I don't think there was a better fit for the Saints and that offense than Chris Olave. I think he was the perfect receiver for them. And he's going into a great situation where he doesn't have a ton of pressure on him to carry the offense with Michael Thomas coming back and Alvin Kamara still there, and now Jarvis Landry taking pressure off him. So he can just kind of come in, play his game, going against number 2 corners with 4.34 speed. Mm-hmm. That's something I'm dreading. Maybe not the first time around, but that second time around
definitely
makes me uncomfortable.
Just kind of circling back to the first kind of topic we touched on, and that is Dennis Allen, the new head coaching hierarchy in New Orleans, and just seeing all the similarities it has to the Bucs. You have obviously Sean Payton, Bruce Arians, both offensively minded head coaches who are renowned for their abilities to run successful offenses. Retire seemingly surprisingly. I think Arians was a bit more predictable than Payton. And then being replaced by their defensive coordinators who have both had unsuccessful head coaching gigs in the past. I think it's something that just kind of uncanny, the similarities that we've had from the two teams. And, like Devin was saying, it's going to be interesting to see the game management changes that might come out of this, whatever the focus of the offense might be or the defense might be. It'll just be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and much like the Bucs, the Saints are still keeping a good amount of continuity. It is a defensive-minded coach taking over in Dennis Allen, but it's still the same offensive coordinator there, Pete Carmichael. He's been there since 2009. He's been there as long as Sean Payton has. So anything Sean Payton gets credit for, offensively, which he deserves all the credit in the world because he was a brilliant offensive mind. Pete Carmichael was standing right there next to him. He was drawing things up. He was calling plays sometimes. He was involved in everything, and now it's his show to run. So if there was ever going to be someone who, in theory, would have all the same know-how and imagination that Sean Payton did, it would be the guy who's been there for nearly 15 years with him.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a similar situation to what the Bucs are dealing with right now. Obviously, Arians retired, but he wasn't the one calling plays. It was Byron Leftwich, and that's not going to change. I feel like for a while. We still got pretty much everyone else the same, except I think a couple defensive staffers, position coaches, because they went to Jacksonville. But watching how these two NFC South current altered coaching staffs are going to perform is going to be a storyline that I'm really, really interested in early in the season. It'll be fun.
It feels like the Bucs are just yin and yang of each other. Good versus evil, just so similar in so many ways.
It is pretty funny. They are pretty similar. Like, obviously, what we just talked about, Jameis Winston.
The link that connects us.
That truly is. He's the I don't know what I'm trying to say, but Devin is just fixing up some internet issues. He'll be joining us again shortly, hopefully. What are you looking to pick his mind about today? Anything in particular other than what we've talked about?
I want to talk about this defense because this defense, as much as we talk about the cap situation, is going to catch up with them eventually. And we did see them, lose a few important pieces this year. They just retooled again. Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May. It's just,
I forgot about Marcus May. Wow.
I know. And he's just like the other guy in the room.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
It's like you think they're going to take a step back, and then it's like, nope, we're taking a step forward. This might be the best secondary in the NFL.
It's very good. That's for certain. Defense is definitely something that should be talked about, especially with Dennis Allen coming in. And it wouldn't be a podcast with Garrett Ballard and JT Olson if we didn't talk about the draft a little bit. I definitely want to ask him about this draft because, we've said it previously. After Chris Olave, we didn't love it. We felt like the Trevor Penning pick is a big time projection, definitely not a year one solution. And then after that, they had Alontae Taylor in the second round, which I think we both felt was a bit of a reach. So despite me thinking that he's a solid player, I just didn't think a top 50 selection was warranted for Alontae Taylor. So I'm definitely interested to hear what Devin has to say about the draft and kind of how he views how they did.
I just really want him to agree with us, just to give me that little peace of mind. Like, oh yeah, Trevor Penning's terrible. Shaq Barrett's going to eat him alive. Jameis Winston's going to get run over.
That's always the hope.
I hope.
We both know the upside of Trevor Penning is very good, but I feel pretty confident that year one will be a bit of an adjustment. I'm also super interested in just kind of talking about how they managed the cap situation. Like we've mentioned it a little bit. Mickey Loomis is a magician. He was in cap hell pretty much, like the depths, and lost one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL to Miami. His name is escaping me. Oh my goodness. Teron Armstead. And then they lost Marcus Williams, right? Yep, to the Ravens. Signed a big deal with the Ravens. And they just kind of bounced back. They didn't really be like, oh man, this sucks. We can't really do anything about it. They went out and drafted a left tackle in the first round. and signed, like you said, Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu. Like, this is a pretty insane front office. Like, they are really, really good at what they do. And I kind of want to hear what Devin has to say about it, because it's truly something to behold. Just kind of watch how they work.
Yeah, it's definitely the same voodoo to manage their salary and do the things they do that it is they always beat the Bucks. It's just magic.
Yeah,
It makes
this is how
no sense
they go
sometimes.
hand in hand. Yeah, they're just they know how to beat the Bucks, and it is so frustrating. I'm also I haven't really looked at their schedule. I'm interested in what his take on their schedule was, because I don't think the NFC South. Who did they draw? Who's the divisions
We've
that they
got the
play?
West.
So we got a pretty tough one.
Yeah, and then
We
they
got-
get the second place team from the East and
Right.
the North. Which the second place team I think was the Vikings and the Eagles. So the Eagles will be a tough one.
Vikings and the Eagles. Yep. Do they have it? Yeah, they're the Vikings. They have a pretty tough schedule, I feel like. They obviously play a lot of the same teams that we do. Like, they got the Bengals, Browns, Ravens. Like, the AFC North is stacked. NFC West is probably the best division in football. Maybe not. AFC North is pretty good.
I'd say
West.
AFC West.
AFC West is, oh my gosh, yeah, how could I forget about the AFC West? That division is crazy.
Anything in that late time zone's looking scary this year.
There's not a bad team in the AFC West. Yeah, like,
I think the worst team is the Chiefs.
I think it's the Raiders.
I think those are the two fighting for third.
I think it's the Raiders. I like Derek Carr. He ain't Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is a different beast, and they killed the draft. They killed the draft. They freaking knocked it out of the park.
They didn't get Devontae Adams, though.
You're right. They didn't, and they lost Tyreek Hill. But I think Patrick Mahomes and whoever they have at receiver is going to, in the end, outplay Derek Carr and whoever they have. I mean, Devontae Adams is a freaking beast, so I could easily be wrong. But
yeah, adding him to a playoff team, which Oakland was last year, is just you don't expect that to be the worst team in the division, but I think there's a real chance that that's the case.
Devin is back. We are back online. A little bit of a hiccup there. We were kind of just going over some of the answers that you were giving us. If you remember what you were talking about, feel free to pick back up. If not, we can just move on. So,
yeah, I think I was making some closing thoughts on Chris Olave, just saying that, I think he would benefit from, being in that receiver room with a couple older veterans and with how the Saints kind of use their receivers. They use them all over the field. I think, he's going to see some really, really nice success in the second half of the season.
Yeah, that's great. Not from my perspective as a Bucs fan, but like I really like Chris Olave. Big draft fan, I think we all are in here. So his success is definitely something that I expect. We were saying that the Bucs play the Saints week 2, and you were saying the sweet spot for the Saints to kind of hit their stride is weeks 5 to 8. So I was like, come on, man, beat them week 2. Got to beat them week 2. That's the hope. But I'll believe it when I see it. But kind of just moving on, real quick, I just kind of want to touch on this Saints draft. I think we all love the Chris Olave pick. And then it kind of gets, at least in my opinion, a bit iffy. I think Trevor Penning is a really, really good upside pick, but I don't really know if he's the best year one solution at left tackle after losing Armstead, who is, as we know, I mean, you're not going to be able to replace him, most likely. Like, it's a very tough task. And then they followed up with drafting Alontae Taylor in the top 50, a player that I liked, but I also felt might have been a little bit high for him. I don't know. But I kind of just want to get your take on the draft as a whole, individual picks, whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, so for me, I had a feeling that if they were going to go receiver, with the first pick, the first of their 2 picks in the draft, I knew that they were going to go tackle, and there was a good chance that it would be a Trevor Penning type or Tyler Smith from Tulsa as well. So going into the draft, I had a feeling that those were going to be a couple of the targets that the Saints go after. And when everything unfolded, there was a lot of like smoke that maybe one of the top few tackles dropped. None of them really did. I think everyone was surprised when Charles Cross went ninth overall to the Seahawks just because their history of drafting in the first round. But for me, I think the Penning pick is certainly one that helps you down the road, and it's not an answer right now because I just don't know if he's going to be ready to start week one, and be able to take that load on as a true left tackle. I thought maybe they think about getting a guy to maybe play more right tackle in the later rounds, and maybe decide move Ryan Ramczyk to left tackle. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios I thought through, but they went with Penning. And I don't dislike the player. I think he'll do just fine in New Orleans. Obviously, the penalties got to be reined in and just be just more technically sound. He's a very raw player in terms of his development. He was able to move a lot of FCS dudes. Obviously, we know what his reputation is, but technically wise, I think he's a bit behind some of the other tackles that got drafted after him. So I think for him, it's going to be about the learning curve, how fast he can pick up things, and how much he can hold on one on his own. Because I mean, it's one of the most important positions of football. So I think for Penning, I think it's going to be about trying to learn day one, from day one, and come in and understand the speed of the game. That's the thing I worry about. The Lante Taylor pick, I just wasn't a fan of it. I was pretty vocal about it just when it happened, but to me, he felt more like a corner that could ultimately be transitioned to safety. And safety was a position that the Saints ended up in pretty hard in free agency. They got Marcus May in free agency, Tyrann Matthew signed later after the draft, and Daniel Sorensen. So it was one of those things where their cornerback room is already stacked. They still have Bradley Roby from last year that they acquired in a trade, plus Paulson Adebo they took in I believe the third round last year, and then Marshawn Lattimore, obviously, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So to me, the pick didn't really make sense because where's he going to play? He's not going to be a starting corner because they already invested heavy capital in that. He's not going to play slot. That's what C.J. Gardner-Johnson plays. So to me, that was more of they like the guy, and since they traded picks to get that first round pick, maybe they thought he was going to be available, on day 3, and I think he would have been, but that's just me. Jordan Jackson and DeMarco Jackson, I like both those guys. I think they're quality rotational guys. But again, this Saints defense is pretty stacked, so I wasn't really expecting them to upgrade a whole bunch in other positions. I thought maybe they dip in the offensive line class again in later rounds. But to me, the biggest question for me is what they're going to do with Lante Taylor. The other ones I feel like have a path to play. I just don't see it with him right now.
Gotcha. That I feel like we're on the same page then, pretty much.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing your thoughts on Trevor Penning because it's exactly what we wanted to hear. That's what we kind of believed, with Penning being a raw prospect, maybe a little bit of a liability as a rookie. But it feels that much better hearing it from your insight as well. Gives me that just a little bit of hope.
Yeah, look, I don't know if they're going to roll him out from start to week 1. I know they have a couple of utility guys. James Hurst is one of them that's filled in many different spots for the Saints over the years. So I think there's going to be a true competition at left tackle. I don't think they're just going to walk in and give him the spot. You got to go and earn it. That's kind of how the Saints operate. And even outside of that, you look at the guard spots. Andrus Peat has been hurt almost every single season. and he's not played a full 16 games in a number of years now. Cesar Ruiz hasn't quite panned out yet at guard after he played center at Michigan. That's because they have Eric McCoy. So I don't know what they're going to do at the guard spots. To me, that's more of a I don't want to say it's the more pressing issue, but it's one that worries me a little bit more than left tackle because I feel like left tackle might be weak, but to me, it kind of matters who's playing next to that left tackle because if he can't hold his own, I mean, you're not going to be able to really do much in the passing game.
Yeah, you highlighted a couple of really good concerns there because a few years ago, the Saints had the best offensive line in football with Ryan Ramczyk and Larry Warford and we were just talking about him.
Teron Armstead.
Thank you, Teron Armstead. Those are some big names, and now it's looking like this could be a liability in some spots. Do you feel like this is a position, the offensive line, that can keep the Saints from winning the South, from going to the playoffs? Are they that big of a liability, that big of a question mark?
I don't know about. I would say it could keep them winning division. I think they could still sneak in because I mean they had issues with the offensive line last year in terms of health, and they still were able to scrape out 9 wins. That's including a game where they just had to throw Ian Book out to the Wolves. That's including that. So, for me, I think it's a concern. I don't know if it's a huge liability just yet. To me, I want to see all those guys fully healthy because the only thing that worries me is just health wise. If one of these guys goes down, like if Ryan Ramczyk goes down, I don't know the answer to who you're going to plug in because then you're going to have to play Trevor Penning if he's not already playing, so to me, it's going to be one of those things where maybe they bring in a few veterans in training camp, or maybe they decide closer to the season, maybe they go after a tackle on the market, So it could be one of those things where they could still be shopping around, especially once they get into training camp and they see that things aren't just working. But with the Saints offensive line, it really hasn't been a concern for them except when there's injury involved. When you think about it, but replacing Teron Armstead is going to be a big, tall task, and it's going to have to be a committee approach and not necessarily a plug-in one guy. So I think they're going to be it can be a liability if they don't figure it out, by like mid-season, I would say. But I think overall, I think there's a decent amount of concern with the offensive line, but I wouldn't say it's something that could keep them from being in the playoffs solely. I think if it would be a combination of things, right? So it would be if the offensive line isn't doing its job or just not holding up, it probably means Jameis Winston's probably turning the ball over because he's under pressure. So if it's a residual effect like that, I think it could be something that keeps him from the playoffs, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I kind of obviously a big part of making the playoffs is knowing your opponent, and JT and I did a schedule kind of recap episode for the Bucks a couple of weeks ago. I just want to kind of get your thoughts on the Saints schedule. Obviously, the NFC South drew the AFC North, which is one of the better divisions of football. Y'all got teams like the Raiders, the Rams, like we drew the NFC West too, which are those two together are two of the top divisions in football, obviously, each having a representative in the Super Bowl last year. And you played the majority of those games past like week 5, which is pretty tough for, I think, a team that's going to be adjusting, like you said. So can I just get some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I remember going through, because we talked about a little bit on sports betting angle, and I went through all 17 games, looked at the Saints, if they're favored or not. I mean, they're only favored in outright 6 games, so that's kind of an indication of how tough their schedule is. So they probably have, I would say, probably a top 5 hard schedule in the NFL because. I mean, the first 4 or 5 weeks, there are winnable games. I mean, the Seahawks, the Vikings games, I feel like winnable. Panthers as well. Even a Falcons game. 4 of the first 5 they could win. Then you have the Bengals, the Cardinals, the Raiders, the Ravens, the Steelers, the
Yeah, that's like
Rams, and
gauntlet right after that. Whew.
yeah, and then the 49ers after that as well, and then the Bucks to cap it off. So you have between week 6 and 13, you pretty much everybody you're playing made the playoffs last year. I believe everyone did. Bengals made it to the Super Bowl. Cardinals lost to in the wild card game to the Rams. Raiders lost in the wild card game. Ravens didn't make the playoffs. That's the one team that didn't make the playoffs. But we know when they're healthy, they're how good they are. Steelers made the playoffs. Rams obviously won the Super Bowl. 49ers NFC Championship game, and then Bucks obviously they lost to the Rams in the divisional game. So between those weeks, that's the biggest thing for me schedule wise. If the Saints can go 500 in that schedule, I think they could have a good chance to make the playoffs. But it's really going to depend on, first of all, they have to get out to a good start in the season. They have to win the games against like the Falcons, the Seahawks, the Panthers. Those are must-have games. Vikings, I think they could afford to lose to Bucks as well. But after that, they have to find wins between week 6 and 13. And when you look at that schedule, I don't know how you're going to find maybe more than 3 or 4 wins just based on how the roster is constructed right now. So that's the biggest concern I would say to the Saints schedule is that middle of it. I mean, those are consecutive weeks with no bye week. They don't get a bye week till week 14. So you're not going to have a break in between. You got to come ready to play every week. There's a Thursday night game in there. I think a couple of Thursday night games in that mix. There's a Monday night game with the Ravens. So they're going to play on pretty much every day in lead up to in those 6-7 weeks. And they got to come ready to play, and they got to figure out whatever issues they have at the beginning of the season. They're just only going to get magnified playing teams that may be playoff runs.
Well, I mean, at least you'll get that break with the Bucks at the end. I mean, until the Bucks get a win, we'll just count those as 2 victories for the Saints.
I mean, even if you give that 2 victories, I mean, it's still. I mean, you still could be heading into the bye week with 2-3 games under 500. And if you're at that point in the season, I mean, it's going to be pretty tough to climb out of because, like, even as you finish season, I mean, you have games against the Panthers and the Falcons, but Browns and Eagles are also week 16 and 17. And both those games are on the road in December. So they have the works cut out for them for sure in the 2022 season.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty tough one. I think NFC South got a bit of a brutal draw in terms of the divisions, the outside divisions that they're playing. Do the Saints play an international game this year? Do they have?
Yeah,
one?
they play the Vikings in week 4 in London.
Okay, cool.
So that's included as well. So they travel overseas and come back and got to play the next Sunday. So
yeah, that's tough. Man, I feel like the NFL should always give a bye week after an international game. I feel like that's a pretty not cool thing to do on their part, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I guess they figured since they play at 8:30 in the morning, they got the whole rest of the Sunday off, and they can travel and spend the rest of the day traveling and whatnot. But yeah, look, I can tell you the Saints when they saw that schedule, they certainly were not pleased because there was talks about maybe making that the Saints Bengals game a international game before they made it the Vikings, and that would have made a lot of people upset. Considering they had Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow played at LSU, that would have made a lot of people upset.
Is that game in? Oh, it is in New Orleans. Wow, that'll be cool. That'll be cool to watch. I'll definitely tune into that one. JT, you I think you had one other question you wanted to ask. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, I got many questions.
Oh.
So let me turn to the defensive side of the ball here. We talked a little offense, got a little overview. We were talking when you were kind of rebooting things, how similar the Saints are to the Bucks. New head coach, it's defensive minded, replacing an offensive coach. And you were replacing your defensive coordinator with a pair of defensive coordinators, much like the Bucks. Ryan Nielsen, who's been there for a few years, he was an assistant coach, and Chris Richard, who was one of the players in creating the Legion of Boom in Seattle. He's only been there for a year, so it was surprising to see him named as a defensive coordinator on this team. Where are you at with this coaching staff in terms of the defensive coordinators kind of assuming some of that responsibility?
Yeah, so I think for them, it's having more minds in the room. I think will help because this defense is it's largely the same, but there's a little bit difference, right? Now the safeties, I feel like it's a bit of an upgrade from Malcolm Jenkins and Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams, not so much because I feel like he's one of the best one high safeties in the league. But in terms of bringing in Marcus May and Tyrann Matthew, I mean that you can't ask for a better pairing in terms of their range and abilities. You can move Matthew all over the field. Can be more of a chess piece if there's a opposing tight end that you want to key in on. You can put Matthew there. But they also have CJ Garner Johnson, who's starting to emerge as one of the better slot corners in the NFL as well. So to me, I think having more minds in the room gives a little bit more creativity because the Saints just play a lot of just man defense, and pretty much told them like you got to beat us, and we're gonna bring the heat. I think they have to be a little bit smarter in terms of how they approach that because there's still going to be questions about how much the offense can produce. You don't want to put them back out on the field quickly. If you give up a long 70-yard touchdown, for example, because you blitzed and sent the house and someone busted loose. So I think they're going to bring in like you said, Legion of Boom with Chris Richard. He understands how to come in and be a part of a unique defensive approach. And with a lot of the weapons that the Saints are playing this year, I mean, the Bengals, the Bucks have quite the receiving core as well. The Ravens are starting to get there in terms of receiving core. The Raiders are on the same schedule as well. That it's obviously got to find a way to slow down Devontae Adams and the rest of the entire offense, Darren Waller as well. So you have a lot of teams that have explosive weapons all over the field. It's just the name of the game now. So you need more of a diversified defensive approach. I think having those two guys come in, both were on the staff, but kind of promoting within. I think that's a lot of what the Saints wanted to do is keep that staff together and not so much getting too many different minds coming in and coaching, but kind of keep stability with the group.
I kind of like how you described that. I feel like when people see like they kind of view it negatively. Not sure that's like something they do on purpose or if it's just like kind of like an inherent response of seeing like, oh, no one's really locked down the job yet. They're just giving it to two people instead. But the way you were kind of describing just keeping it in house, but also getting multiple perspectives, just how to approach a defensive game plan. I think that's a really, really positive spin on that and a really innovative way to kind of approach game planning and just preparing defense because there's not going to be a right way. There's not going to be a wrong way. Collaboration's good. So Bucks Saints, I'm expecting fun things from both defenses. At least I hope.
Well, you think about kind of the safety position. I know Saints have Marshawn Lattimore, but you think of the safety position. You have Antoine Winfield Jr. Able to do so many things. I feel like when you have a safety that can do a little bit of everything, can cover the deep thirds, deep halves, it gives you a lot more versatility, especially with the secondary. You're going to have guys on the field sometimes that aren't always the best in that situation. But if you're disguising your looks, effectively, and you're giving different looks to quarterbacks to get them out of rhythm, and giving just a couple more seconds. Saints and Bucks both have a pretty nice pass rush ability as well. Although I definitely give the edge to the Bucks in terms of youth and experience and production. Cam Jordan, he's still around and still able to do things, but Both teams have young pass rushers that can really break out this year. Joe Tryon and Peyton Turner. I think they're understanding you got to have different approaches to stop these offenses because you can't just throw man defense at them. You can't just throw cover three, cover four. You got to do a little bit of everything, and that's the most effective way. And if it takes multiple defensive minds in a room to do it and find different ways to look at things, so be it.
Yeah, the versatility of that back seven is really a scary thought as an opposing offense. You mentioned Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May. I don't think we even talked about Marshawn Lattimore. Let me ask your opinion on this. Is this the best secondary in football?
I would give it top five. I don't know if it's the best yet because I think they still need to play together to establish that, But on paper, I mean, I think it's certainly top five, in terms of ability, versatility, pretty much everyone. The only question mark I have is the second corner spot. Is it going to be Bradley Roby or Paulson Adebo who locks down that spot? That would be my biggest question mark, only because Roby has shown some flashes, but he's never really, taken the reins of it. Paulson Adebo shown flashes as well, but he also shown flashes of, getting lost in coverage downfield. So to me, I think the second cornerback position keeps him from being in a conversation, maybe first or second. But on paper, I think it's certainly top five.
I just got a real quick shout out to the Saints for always loving the University of Florida DBs. Got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Marcus May, DBU, baby. Come on.
I'll tell you what. Look, Florida and LSU are combining on that football team.
They are.
There was a lot of Saints fans were like, Saints hate, taking LSU guys. They hate signing them. After this offseason, you can't say that anymore.
Nah, never. I mean, honestly, when they get in the NFL and they get proven like they are, the college affiliation goes out the door pretty much, in my opinion, at least. I'll always call them Gator greats because they are, but man, they are some good players, and the Saints know how to identify them. So,
yeah, I'll give Saints credit. There a lot of people were not happy about how they approached the free agency last year, and just not really upgrading. But this year they cap room and all a question mark. They found a way to get difference makers. So I gotta give them a shout out to that. But we'll see what happens. I mean, health is going to be the big thing. Because while a lot of these guys are great additions, they're certainly getting up there in age, and we know father time comes knocking sooner than we like in football.
It's very true. That is very, very true. Shout out Mickey Loomis. He's one of the best general managers in football. It's always a treat watching him navigate off seasons that he has no business being involved in. So, JT, you got anything else for Devin?
I need Devin's insight on one very important thing. Now, you talk about how you cover some sports betting. Now, I don't know if they have that down in Florida yet, but I know we do up here in Michigan. So I've seen the over-under for the Saints at 8.5. Devin, make me some money. Which way am I going here?
I would say I'm leaning over. I could certainly see where they just get 8, because the schedule just the second half of the season is brutal. But I think they can scrape 9 or 10 wins. And that's what makes me take the over. It was funny because the over-under was actually set at 7.5 before the draft. So they even thought worse of the Saints before, they were able to get their haul at the draft and pick up a few guys like Jarvis Landry and Tyrann Mathieu. So 7.5, I would have told you absolutely no doubt in my mind. Here, I would say yes. Like I said, health is going to be the big thing, and if they can figure out the offensive line, and also their opponents are just a tall task, but I think they could squeak out 9 or 10 wins.
There we have it.
My bet down today.
Over lock from Devin Jackson. There you go. Devin, I think that wraps up our line of questioning. we are right around. We're very comfortable timing. So if you have any questions you want to ask us, anything you can bring to your Saints readers, go for it.
Yeah, so I guess from a Bucks perspective, really inside the division, what's your biggest concern about attempting to repeat as NFC South champions? Is there anything in particular that's um, you know may give you pause for cause or just worries you about the 2022 Bucks?
Uh, I'll start off real quick. We've talked about the coaching change. I really don't have any major concerns with that. I think the turnover should be minimal. So I'm kind of go along the same route. The schedule's really hard. Um, if the Bucks drop a couple that the Saints like, because we play a lot of the same opponents, if they pick up one or two wins that the Bucks lose against those similar teams, I could easily see uh, the Saints just squeaking out one extra win that the Bucks couldn't pick up and taking the division from us. So difficulty and just kind of looking at last year, the team was super inconsistent at times. Like um, just from an offensive standpoint, they seemed to be asleep in the first half and come alive in the second half, or vice versa. So I just need to see some consistency and just please beat the teams we should beat, and I'll be fine.
Yeah, I'd say my biggest concern would probably be health. I think that's every team's biggest concern because no one really has the depth to lose key players. But particularly some of our older veterans, Levante David, I think, is turning 33 this year. Will he be able to maintain his level of play and stay on the field as his body continues to age? We just signed Akeem Hicks, who I'm a big fan of, but he's had injuries over the last few years as he's getting to his mid-30s. Will Golston's getting older. So there are concerns with some of our older players keeping that level of play and staying on the field. But other than that, I think this is kind of pecking order lines up pretty naturally to me. And I don't want to sound like that guy, but I think it's Bucks 1, Saints 2. Even with the Saints sweeping us in the regular season again. I mean,
the last
these
two,
are two
who really
good
cares?
teams.
Panthers and Falcons, you can just throw them however you want them. They're not good.
Yeah, speaking of those two teams, you guys have previewed both those teams. You expect anything from either team this year? Any surprises or any maybe they get off to a hot start but fizzle out? Do you think either of those teams could do so?
Their quarterback situations, I just think, are too bad for them to really overcome. I think the Panthers by far have the worst one of the two. I think Mariota could be okay, and with obviously Drake London and Kyle Pitts, can probably do some damage to some lesser opponents. But I think against like the Bucks, I don't think a ton will happen really.
I'm not gonna lie, the Panthers interest me. Talking to Jared Feinberg last week, yes, the quarterback situation is not good. I don't think it's the worst quarterback situation in the NFL because Drew Lock is still starting somewhere.
Oh, true, forgot.
But it's obviously very bad. Other than that, I'm really interested in that Panthers roster. The playmakers, the secondary. There's talent all over. They've reworked that offensive line, and they have a weaker schedule in terms of playing fourth place teams as opposed to second and first place teams. So, if you can take those games versus the Lions and versus who was it in the East? Giants?
NFC East was the
Giants.
Yeah, the Giants. They picked like sixth. Yeah.
So if you can pick off those bad teams, I think they could finish around 500, maybe flirt with the playoff graphic. It just depends on if they can get anything from Matt Corral or Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold or whoever is playing quarterback there.
Yeah, I also have zero faith in Matt Rule, to be honest. I'm not very high on either of those teams.
Yeah, for me, like The Panthers have a good enough roster to make the playoffs. I just think that that's just the case, but I just wonder what is going to be their answer if Sam Darnold stinks it up in the first 4 weeks. You
which
know,
is likely. Which is likely.
yeah, like that's my only question. Like, are they going to be willing to pull Darnold and just go full in on either Matt Corral if they decide to trade for a quarterback like Jimmy G or Baker? Are they going to go full in on them, or are they just going to let it ride out? Because that's my only thing. Is like, I can see a scenario where Matt Rule gets fired by game 6 or 7. Then after that, what happens? I think they could get interesting after that, because then the interim coach comes in. Maybe he goes. Maybe it's Ben McAdoo. Maybe he's the interim coach. Is he going to just pull the trigger and just go with Matt Corral and then just let it ride out? Do they think they could salvage the season? I think they're good enough to get into a wild card spot at 7. I mean, you look at the formula to do it. The Eagles were able to do it last year.
That's a good point.
Because quarterback position wasn't always the prettiest, wasn't the greatest. But they had a pretty good defense, and they were able to squeak out wins. I think the Panthers can do it. Their defense is certainly better than the Eagles in terms of talent. Is Christian McCaffrey going to be healthy? That's my biggest thing. If he's not healthy, I just give the offense a slim chance to really get the ground rolling because Sam Darnold didn't look half bad when Christian McCaffrey was in the game because he was able to just, if there's none open downfield, just dump it off to him. You don't have to force it, but the quarterback position certainly, I think, gives me reason not to believe they'll take a step forward, but we'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
And we saw a little last year of that. They started off 3-0, and I think we forgot about that because they were bad for so much of the year. The lasting memory was they were terrible, but before McCaffrey got hurt, they were an undefeated team, and Sam Darnold looked functional. And I think even if Sam Darnold isn't functional, I think even though I have reservations with Matt Corral, I think he's a good fit for what Ben McAdoo wants to do. He's more mobile than I think a lot of people expect, even though he's not a superior athlete to, say, Cam Newton, who was there, but definitely mobile enough to pull a read option now and then and break a big run out of the pocket. So it's interesting if they can make it work. You have to really put some faith in the coaching staff, which, Garrett, I know you have big concerns of, and I don't not have concerns myself, but there's potential that it could work.
I actually do really like their defense. I think their defense is super talented and super young, really high upside. I mean, Brian Burns is already one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. That guy is a freaking beast. But their offensive line, they didn't really do a ton to address it, other than obviously they got Ike Ekwonu, but I feel like they needed at least one other piece. So.
I think they got Austin Colbert from the Rams, though, didn't they?
Oh, I forgot.
And I think they got Bradley Bozeman from the Ravens.
I was not paying attention to the Panthers. My bad. Scratch that. They could be interesting. I still think they missed the playoffs, but they're definitely better than the Falcons. I'll give them that.
Yeah, Falcons stink.
True.
Yeah, the Falcons are a couple years away, man. They're in a tough spot, man.
I am interested to see if Desmond Ridder plays how that'll go for him.
So the thing with the Falcons, I think, is that I think Mariota will look better than people expect. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think because of Arthur Smith's system, it's going to accentuate his strengths. Throwing on the move, using his mobility. But I just think when teams catch on to that, they're not running the ball effectively enough. I think that's where they're going to run into problems. So
yeah, they're starting running backs with wide receiver.
Yeah, like Cordell Patterson, he's great. They picked Tyler Algier, I think, in the 5th round, but you gotta get some push on the offensive line. It's going to be the biggest question mark, and I feel like they have kind of neglected to address that. So
yeah, their offensive line is definitely bad.
I think they're going to be in a really interesting spot because, say, Desmond Ritter comes in mid-season and does fairly well, the team is still probably going to be picking in the top 5, and they're going to have potentially an opportunity to take someone like C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, one of those big-time quarterbacks. Is that direction, if Desmond Ritter plays well, is that a direction they still choose to go, or do they go more of a Will Anderson? And that's the kind of franchise-defining pick that you really have to be sure on. You have to get that right.
Could be kind of like a Houston Texans situation with Davis Mills. Obviously not the same situation that forced them into Davis Mills. Thankfully, we don't have two of those situations in the NFL. But interesting is a good word to describe it. Just kind of fascinating.
Anytime you're in a Houston, Texas situation, it's not where you want to be. That might be the worst run franchise in sports right now.
Yeah, it's bad.
I don't know, man. Listen. I think the Commanders are right up there, man. I mean,
I was gonna say that. They are
every summer, man. Good Lord, they just
owner might have to sell. It's just all bad from top to bottom. It's not great. I mean, I like Ron Rivera, but
yeah, those are definitely probably the top two. I mean, you could probably throw the Browns in for this offseason, probably two, but in terms of just not even like what's going on with the Watson situation, but like the Commanders, like the Washington Post story dropped last summer about Dan Snyder and what's going on there. So yeah, man, look, it just sucks because like the Commanders have talent, and they're a fairly decent roster. I think they could finish second or third in the East, but just the ownership there just makes it hard to cheer for that team, man. So
yeah, it does. It's pretty upsetting because I love a lot of their players, namely Terry McLaurin. That's like one of my favorite receivers in the NFL. That guy's a stud. But I don't want to drag on too much longer. We're at the upper limits of where we like to be. Devin, any last questions? Quick little remarks.
No, I think just the NC South is going to be a fascinating case study this year because like the two teams that are typically at the top have coaching changes, and the other teams just doesn't seem like they're going to take that next step, And I think it's a fascinating case of like, two teams that were left in pretty good spots, with the head coaches retiring, and felt like that was kind of a common theme across the NFL. More and more coaches and players are retiring, or earlier than you expect. But I'm interested to see, what happens with the Saints throughout the rest of the summer and camp. I think we don't really discuss it too much, but we'll see what happens with Alvin Kamara's legal situation. Was involved in a potential assault of a person. So that hasn't really been there. We don't know what's going to happen with that. I mean, he could be suspended for 6 games. He could be suspended indefinitely if he's found guilty. We'll see what happens with that. I think that's the biggest, kind of looming question for the Saints kind of entering training camp is Kamara going to be one there, and two, is he going to be able to play early on in the season? So that could be another big hurdle the Saints face this season. So just wanted to get that in there before we close out.
Yeah, Devin, we really appreciate you coming on, man. This was a great episode. We really appreciate your insight. Anyone listening could follow Devin on Twitter at @RealD_Jackson from NOLA News. Devin, again, thank you, man. That was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys, and always down to talk ball whenever.
Of course.
And even you Bucs fans who absolutely hate the Saints and you don't want to hear a single New Orleans related word, follow Devin's draft work. He is one of the most underrated draft analysts out there. I mean, he could be on any draft network and he would more than fit in. He's got that kind of content. So if you're a fan of the draft, if you're a fan of football, Devin Jackson is a must follow.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate it.
All right. That is going to wrap us up tonight. As always, thank you guys for listening. Hope you tune in to the future episodes. Go Bucs.
Go Bucs.